Doc, technical difficulties beyond our control. Yeah. Doc, technical difficulties beyond our control. Are we on? Are we having, have we resolved technical difficulties beyond our limited control?
Now we hear something.
Ah,
That's more like it.
so that's the consequence of you having me do all the technology for you, right?
Mike, I am sorry to say, but we're going to have to
Ah.
probably move you on to a different
So that's the
task.
consequence
Oh,
of
let's stick to
you
the economy,
having
eh?
me do all the technology All for right. you.
Simple.
right?
It's the economy, stupid. I am sorry to say, but we're going to have to probably move you on to a different
So that's
task.
the consequence
Oh,
of
let's stick to the
you
economy, eh?
having me Are you getting
Oh.
audio? All right.
Simple. It's the economy, stupid.
And I can jump straight to it if that's what you want.
Oh, that's why. Hello. I've got a feed in there. Okay.
Oh,
Let's try this one more time. Here we
all
go.
right.
We are now at 21 minutes after the hour, and we finally figured everything out. It looks like we've got everything plugged in.
Oh, I can hear.
Yeah, it's coming through on
Oh,
the feed,
okay.
which is exactly what we're trying to get to.
Oh, okay, good.
Well, Mike, forget everything you just said. We're going to start over.
I've already forgotten. What did I say? Starting when?
Starting from the top, buddy.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Well, like I
Well-
was asking you earlier,
All right.
the movie Groundhog Day. You know that movie?
Bill Murray, man. It's
I
one
love
of the
it.
greatest.
It's a great movie. You remember the scene on the bowling alley, and he's lamenting over, the fact that he's having this day over and over and over again, and he's saying, "No, I had a day somewhere in the Bahamas or something, and it was a really good day for him. I'm not gonna, repeat it all." And he goes, "Why couldn't I have that day over and over and over?"
Well, what's the
again?"
difference between that and the day he was having?
Yeah,
He was in what part of Pennsylvania?
uh, Pensacola. Wow, I can't believe I remembered that. Good grief! Wow, you made me stretch.
As opposed to the Bahamas. Yeah, I mean, I could see, okay, there might be a
Alright.
difference there.
But then the guy he was drinking with, he goes, some people would say this glass is half empty, and others would say it's half full. And I'm guessing you're a half empty kind of guy. Yeah. And then Bill Murray, he is so funny how he goes, "But what would you do if you were doing the same thing over and over and
Right.
over again, and nothing you did ever made a difference?" And the other guy says, "That sums it up for me."
Yeah, right.
That was funny. Anyway, the reason I bring that up is the stock market that we all know and love. They are a half full kind of group. They think everything's going to be rosy. They have rose-colored glasses on. They think the Fed's not only going to pause interest rate hikes, but start reducing. They kind of they hope for the best and plan for the best. And when something else hits them, it's like a shock to everybody's system.
So that is a teaser for the upcoming economy section. I need to drink some more coffee, man.
Coffee, double shots, whichever.
Yes. So, Mike, I appreciate you being with me and
course.
joining me one more time on this segment. As we get into the Move It podcast, first of all, thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for your patience. If you were on this particular episode waiting for it to start, we were just ironing out. And as I mentioned in the one that didn't broadcast, we are now in a 3-camera phase, which is slightly a little more elevated than what we've been doing, which it's exciting because it just makes it a little funner, but also adds to the complexity of things. So here we are. This is Move It with the 5 Diamond Group. My name is Jared Uraine with the 5 Diamond Group here at Vice Realty, and this is the Move It podcast. This is what it feels like to be live.
I like it.
Where everything is working right. Yes, so nice. Mike, first of all, thanks so much for joining me, man.
Of course.
You are becoming a staple. I just might change the show to Move It with Mike.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, no.
You've done some great things as far as giving insights on the economy and being able to help us
Thanks.
kind of break things down, keep it real simplified for us, and we'll be able to dive into that a little bit further. But to get us started, we're going to jump into the first segment, and that's going to be our neighborhood gems. Let's cue up that transition. Las Vegas. In our first segment that we had of part 1 in the history of Las Vegas, we talked about how the town was really built off of an aquifer, and being able to get the attraction to this particular location was really based off of having water. You know, we live in the desert. That would kind of be a necessity. And of course, with the water conversation that we're dealing with today at Lake Mead, that we kind of covered how that got started and why we're at what we're at. But from that point in our history, the city ended up growing in attraction due to a couple of things. Obviously, the railroad was a major stop for most people to stop on the way between Salt Lake City and Los Angeles. In addition to that, there was laws that were passed that allowed divorces, quickie divorces. If you stayed for 6 weeks in the city, you can get a quick divorce.
6 weeks, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
right. You had to live here.
Yeah.
And then the other one was gambling. Decided to open that up. Did you know there was a period of time where gambling was not allowed in Las Vegas?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and that's actually what spurred on a lot of the activity as most of the miners came through building the Hoover Dam, because they had opened that up along with the prohibition being relieved. That really kind of opened up the, let's say, the legs of excess here in Las Vegas. Of course, the Hoover Dam brought a lot of construction folks to the city, built the town of Boulder Dam, as we call it, one of the manufactured cities of the federal government. And then in between that, you had Henderson all the way through.
Now, Boulder City was supposed to be a model for the rest of the country on how to lay out a city.
Yeah.
That was the government's motive or what they wanted to get across at that time.
That is exactly right. And it is doing really, really well today. As far as the resale options go in the city, as well as the layout and the design, it's really
Is it
pretty.
still no gambling in Boulder City?
Couldn't tell you. I don't gamble. I don't know. But maybe I could look that up.
I that was, for a long time. I don't know if it still is. It was like one of the only places in Nevada where you couldn't gamble.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, there might be a video worth making right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to go gambling, just don't go to Boulder City.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with the attraction of land as well as housing opportunities, and of course the war, having military bases close by here in town, that just became ground central here in the Clark County area for most folks to start living and establishing roots here. When we take a look at the city's history, I mean, we are a baby. In comparison to cities worldwide, Mike, what's the oldest city you've been to?
I think the oldest would be Athens. I think Athens is older than Rome. I would say that's correct because Mesopotamia came before the Roman Empire. So yeah, Athens.
I'd have to agree with you on that one. And but when you compare that to Vegas, I mean, we're missing about a 0 or 2 there, somewhere in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Because we're literally 100 years into this town,
Yeah.
and we're starting to establish some roots, which is nice. It's kind of neat to see some actual elements of history here. In fact, you, sir, you are a natural-born vegan.
Well, I was born in Utah, but when I was 4, my family moved here, so I've been here, that long.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Long time.
most of your life.
Yeah, yeah.
And you've had the chance to move around town a few times,
Yeah, I've been all over the town, yeah.
as well as the country.
Yeah, I've lived everywhere from New York to California, a few places in between, yeah. Work moved me around a little bit, so my secular activities.
Did you get your kicks on Route 66?
Yeah, you know what? I drove that once, actually. When I decided to drive I drove from California to New York.
Mm-hmm.
Not worth it. Just listen to the song and take the normal route. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it stops in Chicago, so that's kind of where it actually started from. But yeah, done it too, man. It's not the funnest drive as it used to be, but it definitely has a different take on it today. In fact, lots of it has been shut down. What's the oldest hotel you've been to here in
Well,
town?
the oldest hotel I can remember was the El Rancho. Although I was never there, it was pointed out to me, when I was a kid. But And I have friends that did go to the El Rancho. My friends who are in their late 80s, remember the El Rancho as well. So
Yeah, yeah. 1941 is when that opened, and it burnt down. I think in 55 or something like that, 57, somewhere in there.
right.
Yeah. Interesting name that I came across as I was doing the research on this one is a nightclub that was built. That was built before it was called the Frontier. The name of the place was called Paradise,
Oh,
and not paradise in the sense of a paradise city, but a pair of dice.
oh, I like it.
Yeah, pair o' dice is the way it was called, and that
I
was
like it.
fascinating little bit of trivia. It turned into the Frontier Hotel down the road, but that's
Yeah.
where that was located. And it was actually one of the main stops along the route that we now know as Las Vegas Boulevard, which is
So if it was down the road from the El Rancho, that puts the El Rancho at Sahara and Las Vegas Boulevard, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
That was the one that burnt down.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I remember that all growing up too. Looking at the ruins and all that. It stayed empty for the longest time because the individual who owned that land, for whatever reason, refused to rebuild, and they weren't able to do anything with it until he passed on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that puts us into the, well, let's just call it the mob era. We'll pick that up next week. But fascinating history that we have here in town. And it's so fresh and so new. We've got so much of it to be able to get to. But the establishment and really kind of the draw of most people moving to the city, the point is to establish neighborhoods, different communities that were built. And one of the first master plan communities was here in Las Vegas, and we have quite a few of other districts that we can highlight along the way. So we'll carry on next week with the mob era and how we got to modern day activity. That'll be part 3, the history of Las Vegas, here on the Neighborhood Gems. This segment was sponsored by the 5 Diamond Group Real Estate Group, and of course, when it comes to buying in Las Vegas, especially in times that are volatile, I guess you could say, or uncertain is more of the appropriate word.
Uncertain.
Yeah. It's super important to make sure that you get the right information the first time, because one bad decision can definitely impact your future potentially negatively. So what we do is we offer a buyer's consultation. This is a sit-down, face-to-face opportunity to give you a chance to be able to answer all of your questions and also to help you understand what the current market condition is. But most importantly, we want you to walk away with information that will help you make the best decision for you and your family. That's a full buyer's consultation. That's very different than someone giving you the credentials over the phone. And it also gives us a chance to really establish a relationship with you. So give us a call today. You can also reach out to our website at the5diamondgroup.vegas for more information. All right, man. That moves us into the next segment, and that's going to be the market update. Well, since we're talking about real estate, what are the new numbers? Well, most exciting information that has come out recently is going to be our latest market conditions here in Las Vegas. But nationally, not much has changed as far as our numbers go. Demand is picking up, and that's what we've seen is new applications across the country have been picked up over the last couple of months. Why? The result of people just kind of accepting the fact that we are in the 5s and 6s, and we haven't gone past 7 too much, depending on your credit. But most importantly, there is inventory out there. Unlike locally, our inventory has actually shrunk quite significantly. Our median price point for last month has stuck to $425,000 again. Now that's 4 months in a row where our median sales price for a typical home has leveled at $425,000. It's a pretty solid statement, stating that most buyers are comfortable with that price point.
What's the supply?
Our supply went from 4 months of inventory, 4.2 months of inventory in December to 1.8.
Wow, 1.8. What's the days on the market?
Days on the market are going to be...
Throwing stuff at you on the
I
live
know, right?
podcast. Yeah.
It really depends on your price point, but I'll have to take a look at deep dive. Oof. See, that's what happens when you throw me off, man.
Sorry, man.
Days on the market. 50% is March of 22. 80% were less than 30 days.
Wow, days on the market are less than 30 days. And 1 point what?
That was last month. Sorry, last year. This month is 50%, 49.6. 50% were under 30 days.
Wow. Okay, so 50% under, you said 1.8 month supply?
1.8 months of supply.
Wow.
So that tells me several different things here in Las Vegas. A, 425 is a comfortable price point for many buyers. B, the shortage, the increasing depletion of our inventory means that we're kind of putting ourselves back into position as we were dealing with in 2021. Most of 2021, we had under 1 month of inventory. So if we continue to sell and we don't get new inventory, well, we're going to be back to price negotiations, multiple offers, which is then obviously going to drive prices back up, you know? And that would mean that we're pretty much at the bottom at the moment. The question is, how long does that last? Will that continue on? That really kind of depends on how high the rates will go with the Fed and so forth. But with the current messaging in the market today, it pretty much appears that we've flatlined towards what I would call the bottom of this drop that we were experiencing the last few months. And with the shortage of inventory and the increased activity and demand, that would be the third item. See it definitely the next couple of months, our median price point creeping up, and we might very well see multiple offer activity happening.
Well, if
Actually, I'm actually just lost one in a multiple offer scenario.
okay,
So
yeah. If you were to exclude two major macroeconomic events, 2008 and the pandemic, Las Vegas has proven historically to be recession resilient. It's very strong economically. It's pretty steady.
you've experienced it, you would know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in that sense, our appreciation has been very consistent. I mean, from 2008, we had dropped quite a bit, right? And that was internationally, really. In the United States, everybody had an impact on that. And then as far as COVID goes, it really only lasted 2 months, the quote-unquote recession,
Right.
if that. I mean, it was 3 weeks of lockdown, and then almost within another 3 to 4 weeks, we were back to full force on the activity, and then we just saw everything dry up over those months. So the volatility that you hear about in the news is the result of certain actions that are happening. What we're seeing right now is increased activity. We're starting to see a shortage of supply under 2 months now, and a median price point that's been consistent at 425. So if you think prices are going to go down or we're headed for a crash, you are wrong. Have a consultation, get some more information, be able to help you with that, and go from there. And that's some of the fascinating trends that we got right now, man. We certainly have seen the bottom of the cycle here the last, let's say, 3-4 months, and we're going to see more activity.
And that was over the winter months. So
The
you
winter
know,
months, yeah. In fact,
Right.
one of the months being the slowest and lowest number of transactions in Vegas history
Right.
ever. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that moves us on to the next segment, my man, which is the economy.
Oh.
Stupid.
Wait a minute.
Where's that come
yeah,
from?
Yeah, that was the first Bush, right?
Right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I can't remember. Well, and so
Do we have a segue? We want to have a segue.
that's okay.
Good.
So here's your segue, right? Do they have teeter-totters anymore? Is that
Goodness.
a part of playground activity?
Yeah.
Do they really?
Yeah. Not
Okay.
not the old wooden ones, but our community had a metal one. Yeah.
All right. So you remember, when you were a little kid and you were on a teeter-totter, a great big kid on one end and you're high on the other end, right?
Mhm.
And what happened when that big kid jumped off?
you get dropped to the bottom, right?
Yeah, that's my definition of a soft landing when it comes to the
Boom.
Yeah, it's pretty much like that. There's going to be some injury. You're going to be, sore in the tail for a while. Yeah.
Now you're saying soft landing because that's what Jerome Powell says that he was shooting for.
Well, that's what everybody's hoping for. Again, back to the market being, thinking that the cup is half full, despite the fact that they've been disappointed, 9 times in a row projecting what was going to happen and it not happening. The reason I don't think a soft landing is possible, kind of simple. Like Santa Claus, it's never happened in history. So, there's no such thing as a soft landing. They'd like to have one, of course. Everybody'd like to have one. Can you point to one time in history that that's ever happened? No.
Yeah,
So,
I don't know what that means. I've never seen it.
yeah, that's why we don't know what it means. You have to see it once to know what it looks like. Yeah. So,
Yeah. And so with the drop in the economy hitting ground or landing,
mhm.
however you want to frame that, where do we stand on the forecast?
Well, we should start with the banking crisis, right?
Right.
Now, everybody knows about Credit Suisse and Silicon Valley Bank and First Signature, and of
And
course, prior to
that's
that,
like old news, right? That was like
yeah,
2 weeks
yeah.
ago.
Well, that was March Madness, right? So, but the Federal Reserve jumped in and worked as quickly as they could as a backstop to the banks because that's their job. However, the Federal Reserve discovered pretty quickly that they couldn't keep up with modern technology. And as we described last time, a run on the bank can happen at faster than the speed of light, which by the way is 186,000 miles per second. So so they've put in a new backstop. They previously had something called the discount window, which the banks were taking a great deal of advantage of, but now they have something called bank term funding program. And what that means is kind of like this: the banks keep oftentimes long-term bonds to back their assets liquidity, right? So think of the Federal Reserve like a pawn shop, right? And you need money. You need a little bit of money. So you take grandma's jewelry and you go to the pawn shop. Now, grandma bought those rings for 120 bucks, but you're at a pawn shop. What are they going to give you? Who knows, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe you're hoping for, $45, right? Well, the Federal Reserve is giving 100% par value to those underlying bonds, even though they might be worth 80% or less. So right now, the Federal Reserve are giving the banks loans against their long-term bonds that are only paying, 2.5%. And because they're only paying 2.5%, they're not worth what they were once paid for.
Hmm.
Now the Fed's going to give a 100% loan on that. I guess they plan on holding it to, maturity, but that's actually putting the Fed in a bad position. That's exposing them to a little bit of risk. So the Fed's actually going out on a limb a little bit to give these extremely low-cost loans to the bank to keep everything going.
That sounds like we are now heading into risky territory.
Well, the Fed's kind of started to share a little bit of the risk with the banks, and there's contagion. Everybody's concerned about contagion. That spreads to more than just banks, right? There's something called certified mortgage obligations (CMOs), and those are security assets that different entities buy again provide a backstop for whatever financial activities they have in mind. Well, some of those CMOs are being used by annuities for universities or even retirement accounts. Now, here's the problem with those CMOs. Some of those CMOs are A-paper CMOs, and they're paying exactly what they're supposed to pay. But they were put together when interest rates were paying 2.5%. If you were to compare that to a modern-day CMO, who would want the old one? Right? So
Right.
now that puts those annuities with the universities and with retirement accounts at risk. So we're not talking about contagion only to the banking sector. We're talking other places. Yeah.
Which other places would you be concerned about?
Well, I know that in Great Britain, they have serious concerns about retirement accounts. And that would be one that would catch my attention would be, does my retirement account based on, underlying bonds or underlying assets that pay so little that they're not actually worth the collateral that they're supposed to be placing? That would put my pension at risk. If my local union, if that's the method of finance they're using, that puts my pension at risk. So
Does
that
this sound familiar? Are we hearing kind of like these early steps to what we were hearing in 2008, 2009?
no, that's no. No, this all has to do with interest rate hikes because of the speed at which the rates went up. I mean, there were multiple meetings where they went up by half a full 50 basis points. Because those rates went up so quickly, they made these good, you know, underlying assets, the long-term bonds or CMOs, less valuable. It's real simple. If you bought a 10-year bond that pays 2.5%, and today you could buy a 10-year bond that pays 5.25%, which one is worth more money, right? And so, just to kind of put it in perspective, if you bought a $10,000 municipal bond that pays 5.25%, say 4 months ago, that same $10,000 bond would cost you $300 more for the same bond and the same interest rate because it's more popular. In reverse, if you have an old bond that's paying 3%, it's going down in value. You have to sell it at a discount to get rid of it.
Yeah, no
So
loss.
if your pension's backed by something like that, you're in a little bit of trouble. But anyway, that's not the same as 2008. That's more like what happened in Great Britain when the shortest prime minister in history was there. So,
Okay, I'm not going to answer that question because I don't know that history.
uh, yeah,
So we're going to try something new here. We've got a question from
yeah.
the chat. This is going to be a live chat. It's a live
Oh.
question. Let's see if this comes across well. The question coming in from Benjamin is, what's the catch? Like, what's the end game? What's the end goal from a move like this from the Fed?
Well, the Fed is more concerned about inflation than anything else. And unfortunately, well, Benjamin, thanks for asking, by the way. Unfortunately, the Fed is got a lot of headwind regarding inflation. Now, CPI comes out tomorrow, Consumer Price Index. And everybody looks at headline inflation. And headline inflation potentially could come in at 5.2%, which if it does, that's a win, right? Because the last CPI headline inflation that came out was 6%. Right. Six. Well, I think it was 6, right? And the one before that was 6.1. Everybody's focused on headline inflation except the Federal Reserve. They're focused on core inflation. And core inflation may have gone up to 5.6, 5.7. So the Fed's less concerned about headline inflation. The difference is core inflation does not include energy, fuel, and it doesn't include food. And that's because those two items are too volatile to be consistent enough for the Fed to count on. So they take energy and food out, and they look at specifically core inflation. And core inflation, unfortunately, is not only sometimes not going down fast enough, at times it's going up. Don't be surprised if core inflation comes in tomorrow at 5.6. So to answer your question, Benjamin, the Federal Reserve is going to keep raising the interest rates until they get core inflation under control. That's not what everybody's focused on because when they go to the grocery store, they spend $230 and that doesn't last them. But that's not what the Fed's focused on.
Right. So the core inflation number is the expectation is that it should be lower already. It's just not going fast enough. Is that
Well,
true?
yeah, core inflation has to be at 2%, right? And if it's roughly in the neighborhood of 5.6, 5.7, we got a long ways to go. A consumer
Wait,
sentiment.
wait, wait, wait. The glass half empty, the glass half full. I see this as making progress.
Yeah, you go ahead and be a half full kind of guy. Hey, if I'm wrong, that's good. It's always best when I'm wrong.
It is best.
Yeah.
It is always best.
Yeah,
but-
it's best if I'm wrong, right? It's always good for the whole planet if I'm wrong. I don't see core inflation coming down fast enough to slow the Fed down. And core inflation isn't the only problem. There's too many people working. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but unemployment is at 3.6%. Now Friday they thought it was 3.5. They've adjusted it. It's at 3.6, but the Fed wants it to be in the neighborhood of 4.5 by the end of this year.
Yeah, and so at face value, it seems like you're saying more people need to lose their jobs, but the truth is that's one of the quickest ways to impact the drop in the economy because once people don't work, they don't spend, right? They're a lot tighter on their money.
There's less money in the market, and it's a supply and demand thing, real simple. There's so many problems with that. I don't know where to start. There's a labor shortage. Except for I got one for you. I'm a baby boomer. What are you? You're a Gen X,
Gen
right?
Xer.
Now, Lex, the camera guy, Lex. He is he a millennial
I'm
or
gonna call him a millennial. I think he's a millennial.
a millennial? Possibly a Gen Z.
He hasn't quite identified which side he wants to be on.
He's still he hasn't found himself yet. Okay, so uh, uh, oh, Gen C, super cool. I like that one, Lex. That's good. So anyway, there's millennial, and then X generation, and then Gen Z. Well, what do you think the next group is called, Jared?
Goodness.
Uh,
Alpha?
I've heard that, but that's not what the market's calling them.
Tekka.
No, they're calling them Zoomers.
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 They should be
yeah.
Googlers.
Yeah. No, we don't want to promote Google. Yes. So anyway, there's Zoomers, right? Because they got their university education on Zoom, and when they get out of school, they're still on Zoom. They go to work in their pajamas. Right.
Oh, then there's the appropriate name for them, the PJs.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah. So that particular segment, basically 20 to 24, they're actually a little bit on the sidelines, because when they do come out of school, they're being extra picky. Oddly enough, that segment, their 401ks have gone up to about 64% participation, which is extraordinarily unexpected and unusual.
Wow.
So those are the only people on the sidelines. Everybody else is working. And we have a huge missing component when it comes to employment. What do you think it is? What's the biggest missing component?
Appropriate wage?
No, wages are going up. The missing component is immigration. That immigration has been cut way back, and that's hurt the services, child care, some of those.
Oh, man. Throw that one out again.
Okay.
I got to process this.
Yeah. Let's think it through. Immigration has been cut way back. I don't know, like in 2018, 2019, something like that.
So the aggressive approach on making a stand at the border and preventing people from coming in.
Right, building a wall, a moat, etc.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a great idea. All of that has cut back the available number of people that could actually enter the job market. And so as a consequence, guess what? We've had a huge jump in teenagers. Teenagers are now working, a big jump, like 33%, which is way more than anybody ever imagined. 16 to 19 years old. They've jumped up by 33%, trying to fill that gap. People who normally wouldn't hire a teenager for a certain position, they're taking it.
Yeah.
They're taking it because of the lack of people being able to come to the country.
And so the immigration effect has translated into an economic issue.
Tightening of the labor market, because the labor market's so tight. Wages are going up, but only by 4.2%, which is down from 6% last year. But think this through. If they're going up by 4.2% and headline inflation, let's just talk about the headline inflation, is at 5.2 or core inflation is at 5.7, that means wages aren't keeping up with inflation.
Yeah.
It's kind of a spiraling,
It is super complex. That's the whole point of breaking this down so we can really kind of take it into bite-sized pieces.
Well, that's what I'm doing. I'm simplifying it. Yeah.
It's the economy, stupid.
Yeah.
Is it half full or is it half empty? What do you think?
It's half empty. Yeah. What's going to happen is Jerome Powell, he has to reclaim the credibility of the Federal Reserve. They lost a little credibility. Well, they lost a lot of credibility in 2008, and then they got behind the 8 ball during the pandemic. And we had the central bank rate was near zero for so long that now we're facing the hangover. So Jerome Powell's going to just keep hiking that rate. It's definitely going up in May, and I'm going to anticipate it's going to go up at least one more time. It's not going to come down anytime this year. I'm very sure of that.
Yeah.
I'm very sure of that.
Yeah, there's a speculation that it would happen no more times, as much as 2 more times.
I say a minimum of 2 more times. And then we have to watch that core inflation number to see if it holds. It's certainly not coming down. Mm-hmm. The market is betting that it's going to come down by the end of this year.
Yeah, fascinating. They think that the Fed is going to drop the rate by the end of the year?
They think it's going to start coming down because it's anticipated that we will be going into a recession in possibly the 4th quarter of this year, possibly as early as the 3rd, probably no later than the 4th. And historically, what happens is when you go into a recession, in order to save the economy, the Fed will cut the rate. But the Fed's not going to cut the rate if core inflation is not down.
Right.
The Fed's focused on one thing, core inflation.
Hmm.
Well, that and not completely destroying employment numbers, but
Right.
it's a dual mandate. But yeah.
So how does this impact the daily average Joe like myself?
Well, so mortgage rates are going up because the Fed keeps raising the interest rate. Mortgage rates as of yesterday, according to bankrate.com, APR were for a 30-year fixed were 6.96, up from 6.88. That's including closing costs, etc. And so, if you were to buy a home at the median price range here in Las Vegas of $425,000, it comes out to about $2,813 roughly, a month, and that's just principal and interest, not including taxes and insurance. That's just principal and interest. And so, what that means is you have a decision to make. You have to decide to do something today or wait to see, when the Fed lowers the rate. In all reality, especially, when you talk to people like Jamie Dimon or Warren Buffett, they don't see the rate coming down this year. Hopefully by next summer, right? So let's say you decide to play the waiting game until the Federal Reserve starts lowering the rate and hopefully impacts mortgage rates, etc. Well, okay, now you're on to next summer, right? Two things are going to happen between now and next summer. Number one, because of the banking crisis, to get a mortgage is going to become more difficult. You'll hear the term credit crunch, meaning the debt-to-income ratios are going to have to be penciled. It's going to be harder to get a loan, number one. Number two, the second thing that's going to happen, do you really think housing prices are going to go down in the next 12 months? So that's a lot of gambling, right? When I was a kid, there's a very simple expression. One in the hand is better than two in the bush.
Break it down for us, man. Gen Zs, millennials.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One in the hand, two in the bush. That probably doesn't work anymore. So what it means is if you see something that you can do today, do it. You can always make an adjustment in the future if you need to. In other words, if you can secure real estate today, if you're able to do that by combining incomes with family members perhaps, secure it. Don't wait for that uncertain future when you suppose the glass is half full.
Yeah,
I wouldn't go that way.
Speculation. I think I can do this in the next few months if I did X, Y, Z. Yeah, if you've got it now, make it happen, right?
Make it happen. Yeah.
We got a question that kind of follows in on that particular point.
Right.
This is coming in from Rodrigo.
Oh.
What can one do in order to fight inflation since wages are not keeping up?
Well, that's a tough one, Rodrigo. Well, I'll tell you what you can do is fix your car. Don't buy a new one because that's another problem. 16% of new car purchases right now, the payment's over $1,000. So in order to fight inflation, number one, don't go into debt. How simple, right? I hate to sound so simplistic. But with interest rates going up, if you're carrying debt, your payments are higher.
Yes.
You need to simplify your life.
Pay those debts off quick.
Yeah, and stop charging. Just stop charging. And whatever your interest is each month, pay at least double that amount so you can pay down the principal. So have no debt because the doggone interest rates on all your revolving accounts are going way up.
Yeah.
Try not to take any new loans. I'm not telling you to stop spending money entirely, but if you can fix up the old car, don't buy a new one just because you want it, right? The whole point is you want to structure your life in such a way that you can afford a home. Because I'll tell you another thing. To buy that $425,000 home, your principal and interest is $2,800, right? But to rent it is probably $3,500, right? That same home. So that being the case, you're better off right now in this crazy market in purchasing a home, right?
Yeah, to help fight the inflation, right?
Now, does that sound complicated?
No, it's not. But and you actually nailed another good point. First being, paying down the credit portion of that, being able to make sure that you minimize how much debt you are borrowing. Try and minimize that amount. Another stat that I heard yesterday were in regards to electric vehicles. And actually, the cost, about a year ago or 6 months ago, they were at a premium. They were paying
Mm.
top dollar for electric vehicles because of the way gas prices were, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So since then, those prices, Tesla did a price reduction. Depending on which model you get, the Model Y, you can get
Hmm.
it about $6,000 to $12,000 cheaper than it was 6 months ago. Sucks for the people that bought a car 6 months ago, right? Because now the value of their vehicle is even less, right? But at the same time, the cost of a used vehicle is also being affected by that. So these trends have an impact that help the economy, and by buying a new vehicle or adding more debt, it contributes to the overall number in that sense. So one way to be able to help fight that is stop spending.
Well, here's the thing. You have to understand things like, what's your down payment going to be? What's your DTI? What can you afford? What do you want to pay? Is it possible for you to figure that out on your own? I'll give you an illustration. Um, I raised a herd of children, five, and those children were always stress testing the plumbing system at our house. So we were good friends with the plumber. And I'd see the plumber come to the house and he'd remove the commode and he'd snake it and boom, and he was out of there, right? And that cost me a crazy amount of money, like $65 or something. I can't remember what it was. And it took him about 30 minutes. Well, of course, one of the kids put one of their toys, they were stress testing the plumbing system. And so I thought, well, I've seen that guy do that. I can do that. And so I went and I rented the equipment, a snake. I bought tools that I don't generally own because I don't do that kind of work. And I spent the whole day working on clearing that plumbing line, right? I removed the commode, the whole bit. The wax ring, I even bought the little wax ring.
Hmm.
So I snaked it. I put the commode back, the wax ring, the whole thing. Flushed the toilet. Not only is the line still plugged, but now
Now
the
you got to
water's
back up.
the water's leaking out the sides because I didn't seal it proper, right?
All right.
So I called the plumber up. He comes back the next day, fixes it in 30 minutes for about 50 or 60% of what I paid after I bought all the tools and rented the equipment. The lesson learned was I don't do that for a living. Hire it out. Our listeners, they don't purchase real estate. They don't qualify people for mortgages. They don't handle finance for a living. They do other things, and they no doubt do it professionally and well.
Mhm.
But they need to find those professionals that can help our listeners structure their lives in such a way that they can be in a position to achieve their goals.
Yes. Well, thank you for that endorsement, sir.
Well,
But that's an absolutely true statement.
Yeah.
The expertise, our job is to be able to understand and how to navigate and guide people. And the opportunity that is available to folks is a free service in essence, depending on how you look at it. You can have it pay for itself. And that goes across the board, not just for real estate, but for mortgage lending, for credit repair, for purchases, credit improvement, whatever the case may be. There are a plethora of options to pick from. There's always an expert in each one of those fields.
I made the same mistake building a fence once. You don't know what the problem is financially until you get a financial snapshot or x-ray. And typically speaking, you need a professional to do that with you.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Mike, thank you so much, man. That wraps up the economy section, and definitely thank you for your insights and expertise and being able to get that broken down for us.
Thanks for the questions that came in from our two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rodrigo and Benjamin.
Rodrigo and Benjamin.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Very good.
I knew Rodrigo. It was Benjamin. I couldn't remember that one. Sorry, Ben. Yeah.
Well, this segment was brought to you by the Five Diamond Real Estate Group. And of course, when it comes to selling in today's market, being able to have the expert guide you in maximizing your options is super important. If you'd like more information on how we can best serve you and have you decide how much we get paid, take a look at our menu of options at fivediamondgroup.vegas. My name is Jared Uraine with the Five Diamond Group. That does it for this segment. We're going to move into the last quick segment, which is our inspiration, moment of inspiration. If I were to put a headline to this, the concept that I came up, or not the concept, the thought that I woke up with this morning, Mike, and we hadn't talked about this before, but see if you can follow me with this.
All right.
Do you remember a song from the 80s from Genesis called The Land of Confusion?
I didn't do the 80s. I did the 70s.
Ah, man.
Sorry, yeah.
So there was a song from Genesis in the 80s called The Land of Confusion. It had this
Right.
really cool video with Muppets in it, and it talked about kind of like the Cold War and all the drama that was with it. But you know, the lyrics and the message behind that was really talking about how media really distorts the messaging that people receive, and that is something we now 30 years later see it completely polarized in various different ways. Now you add the element of AI and the lack of people talking about things that are actually true, whether it be morals, facts, or truth. Those things have been completely skewed and distorted. Me growing up as an individual and kind of having a society that would kind of give you an idea of what those guardrails are, can only imagine what our current generation is dealing with. And I think the land of confusion has now turned into a world of confusion. I think we're heading down that path quite a bit. And so my recommendation for our young folk that are out there is, man, seek the truth, do the research, don't take your word for mouth, question everything. And if you need to be able to get help on that, get help from people who truly have your best interests at heart, and not someone who's got some sort of soapbox to get on with that. So seek out the truth, man. That's one of the best things
I
you
would
can do.
recommend talking live to somebody as opposed to, social media.
Doing a search, because that chat GDP and
Right.
all these formulations, they can absolutely skew the perspective on there, man. That does it for this episode of the Move It podcast with the 5 Diamond Group. My name is Jared Uraine, broker salesperson here at the 5 Diamond Group at Vice Realty. I want to thank you so much for joining in today, and especially to our listeners who contributed questions. We look forward to seeing you next week. Same bat channel, same bat time. Tuesday, 1 o'clock. We're going to go live. And of course, what? Yeah. Thanks, Lex.
Yeah, one-ish.
One-ish.
Yeah.
That is
One-ish,
true.
yeah.
We're still ironing out the whole live
Yeah,
thing,
yeah,
which
that-
I am absolutely enjoying as much pressure and probably irritation. It's been for
Pressure's
people.
good for you. Ask my kids.
I
Yeah.
love it. I think it's great. Keeps us going. But thanks again for tuning in. If you'd like more information for any of the content that we've provided today, please feel free to reach out to us directly. You can also click on our website for more information there. And make sure you subscribe to our social outlets across the board. They've been going across the screen. And finally, ring those notifications every time we post a new video for anything else we do. Thanks again for joining us. My name is Jared, Mike,
Hey.
with the 5 Diamond Group here at Vice Realty. Have a good day.